Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and every university degree, every PhD, um, every professional certification you've ever earned has just been wiped from the global record.
Completely gone, yeah.
Right, like legally, culturally, they mean absolutely nothing. That expensive piece of paper on your wall is it's just paper.
Which is a terrifying thought for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. But in this scenario, the only way you can prove your worth, your intellect or your capability, is by pointing to what you actively built yesterday and what you are building today. So welcome to the world of 2026 to 2100.
It is, it's just a massive conceptual leap, really. We are so accustomed to the idea of a constitution as this, a political document defining borders, taxes, rights within a specific country.
Right.
But what we're looking at today, it attempts to govern how we grow as a species, how we validate our intelligence, and what we will ultimately leave behind.
Yeah. And welcome to today's deep dive. For you listening, we are looking at a stack of foundational documents for an international framework called IALVE. And for those wondering about the acronym, it utilizes the international abbreviation for artificial intelligence. And it stands for, get ready for this, the Global System for Lifelong Autonomous Learning and Living Knowledge Management.
It's quite a mouthful.
It really is a sweeping title for a highly, highly ambitious project.
It is, and I mean, every single word in that title carries serious structural weight. The goal of this document is not just to, propose a new high school curriculum. It is attempting to basically rewire the entire infrastructure of human knowledge.
Yeah, because when I first opened these sources, I sort of anticipated a roadmap for digital infrastructure or maybe like a corporate manifesto on how to optimize workforce training.
Right, like a tech brochure or something.
Exactly. But it reads so much more like a knowledge constitution. I mean, it redefines education, it sets these really strict boundaries on our relationship with AI, and it attempts to map out a trajectory for global well-being over the next 74 years.
And that is our exact mission for this deep dive today. We need to unpack the core pillars of this system. We're going to examine how it shifts the burden of learning entirely onto the individual, how it aims to replace traditional credentials with tangible output, and critically, how it envisions utilizing AI without, letting the technology strip away our humanity in the process.
Right, which is the big fear everyone has right now. But before we can get into the massive global infrastructure this framework proposes, we kind of have to start with how the authors view the individual human mind.
Right, the foundation.
Exactly. In the foundational declaration and their guiding principles, education is framed not as a luxury, and certainly not as like a phase of life that just ends in your 20s when you get a diploma.
No, it's framed as a fundamental, unending human right.
Yes, unending. The principle they establish early on states super clearly that learning continues throughout life. But they expand on that in a way that it fundamentally alters the traditional definition of education. The specific quote is, every person can learn, unlearn, and relearn.
And that word unlearn is really the pivot point there.
It really is, because I see a lot of people conceptualizing education as sort of stacking bricks. Like you just keep adding new facts on top of old facts. But unlearning suggests something completely different.
Right. It's not just accumulation.
Right. It makes me think of managing a massive overgrown garden. You can't just keep planting new seeds if you refuse to aggressively rip out the invasive weeds, the obsolete information that are just choking the soil. Or, like a software update. You wouldn't install an operating system at age 18 and just never patch it.
The software update analogy is spot on. And the framework actually argues that in an era of, exponential information growth, clinging to outdated information is arguably more dangerous than flat-out ignorance.
Wow, yeah.
Because what IA Live is doing by centering lifelong autonomous learning is recognizing that facts change. Industries pivot overnight.
Yeah, they do.
So what was considered a best practice 10 years ago might actually be a critical liability today.
But unlearning is psychologically painful.
Yeah.
I mean, people hate being wrong, and we tie so much of our identity to our expertise.
Oh, completely.
If I spend 20 years mastering a specific way of doing things, the idea that I have to autonomously realize my expertise is obsolete and tear it down myself, I mean, that requires a level of humility that traditional education doesn't really teach us.
Which is exactly why the shift from institutional learning to autonomous learning is so difficult. You are no longer waiting for a a university board to update a syllabus and tell you what the new reality is.
Right, nobody's holding your hand.
Exactly. To be an autonomous learner, you must have the critical thinking skills to audit your own internal database. You have to actively identify the weeds in your own garden, as you said. The framework argues this continuous cycle of learning, unlearning, and relearning is really the only true pathway to building a resilient knowledge base.
Okay, let's follow that logic into the real world, though. Because if society actually adopts this model, where we are constantly pruning and updating our mental software, then the traditional ways we prove what we know become completely inadequate.
Right.
Like a static diploma from 2010 doesn't tell an employer what you unlearned yesterday.
It doesn't tell them anything about your current capability. And this is where the IA-OLVI framework gets highly disruptive. They have a guiding principle that states the evidence of knowledge is the living work, not certification.
Okay, but this is where I have to push back a little on the logistics. Because if I take courses, I read 1,000 books, and I study architecture, the system says a piece of paper means nothing. I mean, my evidence is the actual house I built.
Essentially, yes.
It sounds great in theory, like applying a software developer's GitHub repository or an artist's portfolio to every single profession. In coding, nobody cares about your resume if your GitHub is empty.
Right. Yeah.
The work completely eclipses the credential. But does that really scale to everything? Like, what about a surgeon? If there are no standardized medical degrees, how do I know my surgeon's living work is actually medically sound and not just, I don't know, a popular DIY surgery blog?
Yeah, no, that is a totally valid concern, but we have to look at how the framework actually defines a living work. It isn't just a subjective blog post or a YouTube video.
Right.
A living work in a highly technical or medical field would require observable, verified, real-world outcomes. So in the context of a surgeon, their living work is their continuous track record, their peer-reviewed surgical outcomes, their ongoing contributions to medical innovation.
Ah, I see.
The framework isn't arguing against rigorous standards, not at all. It is arguing against the idea that passing a multiple-choice test at age 25 proves you are still competent at age 50.
Wow. Okay, so it's shifting the evidence from a static moment in the past to continuous proven competence in the present.
Exactly. And think about what this does to the gatekeeping of knowledge. Historically, a certification often just proves where you were privileged enough to study, right?
Yeah, that you could afford it.
Right. It proves you had the financial means and the time to sit in a specific institution for 4 years. But by shifting the ultimate evidence of knowledge to the living work, IA Live Leave attempts to democratize access. The valuation of your intellect is no longer tied to an institutional pedigree.
It is tied to what you are actively contributing to the world, regardless of where you acquired the knowledge to do it.
Precisely.
That makes total sense. It levels the playing field. Like if you can build the bridge and the bridge holds weight, it shouldn't matter if you learned the physics in an Ivy League school or autonomously in a public library in Nairobi.
Right. The bridge stands or it doesn't.
But here's the next operational hurdle for me. Let's say I create this living work. I build the bridge, I write the code, I develop a new agricultural technique. Under this system, it doesn't just sit in a vacuum.
No, it doesn't. The framework outlines an evolutionary path for this knowledge. The goal is that a living work eventually evolves into what they call a living book.
Yes, and the sources are very specific about the threshold for this transition. They state that a person becomes a living book when their experience inspires and serves as an example to others.
That's the exact phrasing, yes.
But how does a global system measure inspiration? I mean, is this just going to turn into a massive social media popularity contest where the most viral ideas become living books, regardless of their actual utility?
Well, if it operated like current social media algorithms, yes, it would absolutely fail.
Right.
But the framework specifically pairs inspires with serves as an example. That implies utility and replication. So if a farmer in India develops a new drought-resistant method, that is their living work.
Okay.
When farmers in Brazil and Australia adopt that exact method and survive a drought because of it, that work has served as a tangible example. It has inspired action. That is the moment it transitions into a living book. It is about measurable impact, not just engagement metrics or likes.
I really appreciate that distinction. It's a powerful visual, actually, when you take away the digital metrics and just look at the human element.
Yeah.
Like, I want you listening to this right now to imagine your own life as a dynamic volume on a global shelf.
It's a great way to picture it.
The things you've figured out, the obsolete ideas you've painfully unlearned, the specific projects you've built, all of it becomes a living book that someone halfway across the world can check out and learn from.
Yeah.
You basically become a tangible piece of human history while you are still living it.
It is a profound structural shift from individual achievement to collective human wisdom. And the official institutional motto maps out the cascading effect of this system quite literally.
How so?
It states that these individual living books combine to enrich and strengthen a global human library. The human library then strengthens the global community. And finally, the global community strengthens what they term the purpose of life.
That is just a beautifully structured chain reaction.
It really is.
But let's look at the mechanics of maintaining this chain reaction. Logistically, if you have 8 billion people autonomously learning, constantly uploading and updating their living works and transitioning into living books, I mean, a human bureaucracy would collapse in an afternoon trying to index and verify all of that.
Oh, absolutely. It requires astronomical computational power just to keep the library from catching fire, basically.
Which brings us to the technological infrastructure, the IA in IALEV. Artificial intelligence is really the only way a system of this magnitude can function in real time.
Right. But the way they integrate AI is fascinating.
Yeah, because in so many tech utopian visions we look at, humans eventually get sidelined. The AI becomes so efficient that it just kind of takes over the heavy lifting of decision-making, governance, creation, all of it.
But IALAV codifies the exact opposite.
They do. They draw a strict constitutional boundary. The text literally says, artificial intelligence and emerging technologies strengthen human potential but do not replace it. They classify the AI's role strictly as responsible support.
It is a critical safeguard. Let's use the analogy of a massive global loom weaving a tapestry.
Okay, like that.
The AI is the loom. It provides the structure. It can translate your living book into 50 languages in a millisecond. It can instantly match a learner in Tokyo who has a specific problem with a living work created in Kenya that solves that exact problem.
Right.
It organizes the threads. But the AI cannot create the silk.
Because the silk is the lived experience.
Precisely. To go back to your point earlier about unlearning being psychologically painful, an AI doesn't feel pain.
No.
It doesn't bleed, it doesn't fail a business, it doesn't suffer a drought. Therefore, it cannot synthesize wisdom from hardship. The system relies entirely on human talent and human ethics to generate the actual value. The AI is forbidden from replacing the human essence because, without the human essence, the library is just an empty database.
It's incredible. It's an amplifier, not a substitute. It essentially handles the logistics so the human can focus entirely on the lived experience.
Right.
But this brings me to the biggest surprise I had while reading these documents. We have this sprawling apparatus, right? Humans autonomously unlearning, AI weaving the connections, billions of living books populating a real-time human library. But to what end?
Right. What's the goal?
When I started reading this, I assumed the ultimate goal of a global tech and education system would be something like, I don't know, colonizing Mars, achieving the singularity, or building a perfectly optimized digital economy.
And instead, the framework pivots into a completely different set of values.
I have to admit it really threw me off. The official institutional motto states that knowledge must generate well-being for people, communities, and nature. It explicitly mandates harmony with nature. It lists the protection of animals, biodiversity, and natural resources.
It goes even further than that.
It does. It even promotes natural nutrition alongside physical, mental, and emotional health. We are looking at an advanced AI-driven educational framework, and right in the center of their ultimate vision, they're advocating for ecology and eating well. How do those things even connect?
It seems disconnected only if we view education purely as an economic tool, which is unfortunately how modern society largely operates.
Yeah.
We tend to train people to be productive gears in an industrial machine, but if we look at what living knowledge management actually implies, the connection makes total sense. The authors are arguing that an education system completely disconnected from ecological realities might produce incredibly smart people, but it produces a destructive society.
So you can have a society full of PhDs that invents brilliant technology, but if that technology poisons the water supply and destroys biodiversity, the knowledge system has actually completely failed.
That is their core argument. Human intellect is fundamentally inseparable from the health of the planet we live on. All the collected data in a human library is worthless if the environment is collapsing around it.
Wow, yeah.
The overarching goal, which they state clearly, is the sustainable development of humanity for present and future generations. They tie the ultimate purpose of life directly to democracy, ethics, universal human values, and, as a direct quote, a healthy and joyful life.
The healthy and joyful life. You rarely see that phrase codified in a global manifesto. Usually it's about efficiency or security or economic dominance.
Exactly.
Framing the entire purpose of learning around joy and health, it just humanizes the entire project. It means you aren't engaging in lifelong learning just to stay competitive in the cutthroat job market. You're learning so you can contribute a living work that might help sustain the ecosystem or strengthen the emotional resilience of your community.
It radically recontextualizes why we learn in the first place. It shifts the motivation from personal extraction, getting a degree so I can get a high-paying job just for myself, to collective contribution. How can my autonomous learning create a living book that leaves the planet slightly better than I found it?
It's a complete paradigm shift. I mean,
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground today, and I think it's worth tracing the steps of this framework just one more time to see the whole picture.
Let's do it. The logic of the system builds sequentially. It starts with the individual mind. The framework demands that we step away from static institutional learning and take responsibility for our own lifelong autonomous learning.
Right?
That includes the difficult ongoing process of unlearning obsolete information to make room for reality.
And once we adopt that mindset, the way we prove our capability changes. We move past the traditional static diploma and we start proving our knowledge through continuous real-world contributions, the living work.
Exactly. And when those works achieve a level of utility that they inspire and serve as examples to others, they transition into living books. These books populate a global human library, which basically democratizes access to collective human wisdom.
And all of this is logistically held together by artificial intelligence. But crucially, the AI acts strictly as an amplifier and a coordinator. It is constitutionally forbidden from taking the wheel or replacing the human lived experience at the core of the system.
Finally, the entire massive infrastructure isn't designed for arbitrary technological advancement. It is aimed at a deeply holistic goal: generating well-being, protecting nature and biodiversity, and ensuring a joyful, healthy life for current and future generations.
It really is a 74-year blueprint to rethink what it means to be an educated, contributing member of this planet. And while the dates on the document stretch all the way to the year 2100, it leaves me thinking about how these principles apply to us right now, today.
Yeah, I mean, the formal system might be a vision of the future, but the philosophy of autonomous learning and contributing living works is something anyone can adopt immediately.
Which brings me to a final thought for you to mull over. I want you to revisit that scenario we started with. Imagine tomorrow. Every certificate, every degree, and every bullet point on your resume simply vanishes. You can only be judged by the tangible evidence of your intellect and your empathy. What exactly is the living work you're creating right now, and what chapter of your life is going to serve as a living book to inspire someone else tomorrow?
It's a question that certainly changes how you plan your week.
It changes everything. The learning never stops. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into IALVE. Keep building, keep on learning, and we'll see you next time.